So, dumb phones versus smartphones. I grew up when I was a kid. This is what a cell phone looked like. Um, it had pretty much one function. It did that one function reasonably well. But in the more recent years, we've had the explosion of the internet. Um, Microprocessors have gotten smaller and smaller. Wireless communications have gotten better and better. Now we have smartphones. Um, and if you consider the differences between a smartphone and what I'm calling here a dumb phone, or a regular phone, phones from a classical phone. The main difference between a smartphone and a dumb phone is that the smartphone has more sensors, it has more connectivity, it has an intangible information processing system, so it has an operating system. Now anyone can make an app and install the app on there, and it doesn't require any changes to the hardware. You know, whereas the old phone, the dumb phones, they did one thing: they just made calls. They had one antenna. They they transmitted the signal, turned it into audio. It took in your voice and transmitted that into a wireless signal to the cell phone tower. Whereas smartphones, well, they do all kinds of things. They got cameras on the front and the back. They got gyroscopes inside. They have voice recognition. They have Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, 3G, 4G, 5G. Um, you know, and then they have the ever-expanding software part to it. Whereas the dumb phones didn't have any real operating system to think of. Nothing expandable. Nothing that could adapt. The smartphones make decisions on their own. You can hit a button on your phone and it's going to go pull the weather and pull information about traffic and put you on the best route. That's what kind of makes it a smartphone. It's able to do behind the scene processing, and it pulls from many different sensors. It pulls from all these different sensors and receptors, processes it, and then gives you the answer. That's the whole idea that the phone is smart. You don't have to do the work. So what happens when you have dumb humans, dumbed down humans? This is a whole idea that is popular. A lot of people would agree that the general population is being dumbed down in a sense. But what does that mean? Well, horses are usually made to wear these little blockers on their face, over their eyes, and this keeps them looking forward, so they can't look off to the side or look behind them, and they won't get thrown off track. It reduces their scope of information, their visual information, and keeps them keeps them on track. Human beings, we're being treated the same way. We're very narrow-minded. We've locked into the physical reality with the whole idea of the physical five senses only. And we're usually too busy watching Netflix, or we're not tapping into our full information accessing capabilities. Just like the horse, we've been our field of vision, our focus, our ideas of perception have been narrowed, and this reduces our ability to take our own volition, to act on our own will, and use our own creativity, just like the horse, who just has to walk down the street and carry the load. He's unable to really shake free. He's being limited to, he has too little information to act on. And it's a similar thing happening with human beings. We're being reduced. Our senses have been reduced, or the idea of what our senses are has been reduced, and therefore we operate at a reduced capacity. Now, this whole subject is a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people who have a certain way of seeing the world. There's two main ways to see the world. Stephen A. Schwartz points this out in his book, Secret Vaults of Time. He talks about the physicalist materialist model and the interdependent interconnected model. The physicalist materialist model is the model that most of mainstream science ascribes to today. most of the world takes this as to be scientific conclusive fact. And the main premises of this belief are the mind is solely the result of physiologic processes. So biological, physiological processes have created your experience in your mind. Each consciousness is a discrete entity. That's to say, everything is separate from each other and discrete. No communication is possible except through the defined physiologic senses. And that's the whole idea that only the physical five senses can communicate information. And consciousness dwells entirely within the time-space continuum. So there's this whole idea of time and space, and in the physicalist materialist model, our minds are within that continuum of time and space, trapped, so to speak. Then there's another way of seeing the world, and this is the interdependent, interconnected model. And this states that only certain aspects of the mind are a result of physiologic processes, that consciousness is causal, and that physical reality is its manifestation. So it's kind of the other way around. The physicalist model says that physicality and your physiology produces consciousness, whereas the interconnected model states that consciousness is causal. So it's a different way of seeing things. All consciousnesses, regardless of their physical manifestations, are part of a network of life which they both inform and influence, and are informed and influenced by. So there's a passage back and forth between the individual and the collective. And that some aspects of consciousness are not limited by the space-time continuum. And this interdependent, interconnected model is the model that I'm leaning towards after all the things that I've seen, experienced, and come to know over the last 7 or 8 years looking at this subject. Let's look at a quote here from Dean Raden. He's a PhD. He's a senior scientist at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, and he's the founder of the Consciousness Research Laboratory at the University of University of Nevada in Las Vegas. He says, "Since primeval times, people have spoken of strange and sometimes profoundly meaningful personal experiences. Such experiences have been reported by the majority of the world's population and across all cultures. In modern times, they're still reported by most people, including the majority of college professors. These experiences, called psychic or psi, suggest the presence of deep, invisible interconnections among people and between objects and people. The most curious aspect of psi experience is that they seem to transcend the usual boundaries of time and space. The long-held common sense assumption is that the worlds of the subjective and objective are distinct with absolutely no overlap. Subjective is in here, in the head, and objective is out there in the world. Psi phenomenon suggests that the strict subjective-objective dichotomy may instead be part of a continuous spectrum, and that the usual assumptions about space and time are probably too restrictive." So this is what Dean Raden had to say after all of his research. He's saying this whole idea of subjective-objective being completely separate, we may have to, look at this again, because since the beginning of time, people have been talking about these experiences. So this isn't simply just some fantasy or a mental illness that people are suffering from. This is a real phenomenon that happens, and as he said, even including a majority of college professors have these kind of experiences.